I'd like to offer the floor to Director General of WIPO, Mr. Francis Gurry, to deliver his 4 reports to the assemblies. Please, you have the floor, Director General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Honourable Ministers, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and Permanent Representatives, distinguished delegates, it's really a great pleasure for me to join the Chair in extending a very warm welcome to all delegations to this session of the WIPO Assemblies. It's very gratifying to see such a large presence here this morning, so many delegations. I think we have around about 1,200 registrations, and I should like to thank all of the member states for their commitment to and support for the organisation, which is so manifest in this very good presence and participation that we have this morning. I should like to, at the outset, also thank Ambassador Zong for his leadership, his commitment and his wise guidance over the course of the past 12 months in his capacity as Chair of the General Assembly. We're very grateful to you, Ambassador Zong. Equally, I should like to thank the other ambassadors and representatives of member states who are performing functions as chairs of our other governing bodies or of our committees or working groups. The smooth functioning of the organisation is very dependent upon the generosity and commitment of those who perform these roles, and we are very much indebted to you. Turning to intellectual property. Intellectual property continues to grow in economic and social importance around the world. And this increased importance or prominence is being, of course, driven by rapid, profound and pervasive technological change, which is shaping the future of the economy and placing increased value on knowledge in its commercial and economic expression as intangible assets. We can see this change in the position of intellectual property in, I think, many ways. In demand for intellectual property rights, in the attention paid to intellectual property as part of innovation and industrial strategy on the part of governments and of enterprises, in trade discussions, and in the news and analysis that we receive from the media and the general public concerning intellectual property. Let me take just one of those indicators of change in the position of intellectual property, namely demand, and if I may give you a few figures concerning the evolution of demand in relation to intellectual property, which I think is a good indicator, not the only one, but a good indicator of this increased prominence of intellectual property. In 2016, that's the last year for which we have complete statistics from our member states, around the world there were 3.1 million patent applications, 7 million trademark applications, and 960,000 design applications filed. Now, those are prodigious numbers, really, and if you go back 20 years only, those numbers for 2016 represent increases of 189%, 253% and 388% respectively. There are numerous explanations, I think, for these huge increases, the most prominent being the domination of the economy by technology, the global nature of economic activity and the emergence of new actors through geopolitical change, which has resulted in innovation becoming more multipolar. And let me just dwell on that the last of those explanations, and pause to note that Asia is now the dominant source of intellectual property applications throughout the world, representing over 60% in all categories, on average, of the origin of intellectual property applications. Now, this intensification of IP activity around the world, I think, translates positively into the life of this organisation and its beneficial influence can be seen, I think, in a variety of ways, a multiplicity of ways, really. First of all, the increased worldwide demand for intellectual property obviously translates very positively into the demand for within our own global systems, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the Madrid system for trademarks, the Hague system for designs, and the WIPO Arbitration and Mediation Centre. Each of these systems is experiencing increased participation, increased geographical coverage, and also rises in demand. So the PCT received 243,000, as I think you know, international applications last year, which is really quite a large number, and it was an increase of 4.5% over the preceding year. The Madrid system, it received 56,000 international applications, and that was an increase of 5% over the preceding year. And within the Hague system, applications were filed for about 19,000 designs, a growth rate of 3.8% over the preceding year. Within the Arbitration Centre, over 3,000 internet domain name disputes were filed, and around slightly more than 50 arbitrations and mediations for intellectual property disputes generally. These are all record figures, and a good thing for the organisation. And of course, those record figures within our various global systems translate in turn very positively into a stable financial condition for the organisation, since the global systems are responsible for 92% of the revenue of the organisation, as you know. So we finished the last biennium, 2016-2017, with an overall surplus of 56 million Swiss francs. And that result was reached by this increasing demand that we have seen, higher than budgeted, but also through prudent financial management, and some of the achievements in relation to financial management in the course of the last year include containing personnel expenditure, repaying all of our outstanding loans on the campus and buildings, the new buildings that we have undertaken in the course of the last 10 years, and the vesting of all the core and strategic cash of the organisation in accordance with the revised policy on investments which the member states approved. In other respects, if we look at the treaties of the organisation, administered by the organisation, we see that here too, again, the intensification of intellectual property activity worldwide is translating into a steady increase in the participation of our treaties. The Marrakesh Treaty for facilitating access to published works for visually impaired and print disabled persons is the fastest moving of the WIPO administered treaties. And this is true not only of the last year, but probably historically. So at the moment, the number of contracting parties stands at 41 after 5 years, but we are expecting the European Union to accede to the Marrakesh Treaty in the course of the next week or two. And that will bring the number of members close to 70. And I think, given the activity that we know is going on in many, many member states, in preparations for accession to the Marrakesh Treaty, I think we can confidently look forward to a time when the Marrakesh Treaty will be universal, and that will be a great achievement, I think, for the member states. There are many other areas. A lot of them are detailed in the written report that you will receive. Allow me to mention just a few others, where we see again the positive enthusiasm, let me say, for intellectual property worldwide, translating very well into the work and the life of the organisation. In our IT systems, we see extensive IT systems and platforms, we see extensive cooperation amongst the member states. Over 80 member states use our so-called IPAS system, which is an IT system for administration and management of intellectual property. That's quite a significant number. Our global databases continue to expand in size and in coverage, and they rely on the member states' provision of data. Our technology and innovation support centres has been an extraordinarily successful program. There are now 640 TISCs, as we call them, Technology and Innovation Support Centres, established in 76 countries, which as an achievement over a period of about 6 or 8 years is really quite exceptional. And all of these and other platforms in the IT area that we have, I think, provide an opportunity for closer data-driven international cooperation amongst all of the member states. The development dimension is present in all parts of the organization's work. The IT platforms that I've just mentioned, for example, were developed for developing countries and receive extensive participation from all of the developing countries. The demand for our capacity building activities continues to increase as intellectual property infiltrates more areas of society and the economy. The WIPO Academy is experiencing record levels of registrations for its various courses, online and physical. The programs of the organisation support the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, in a multiplicity of ways. The member states are engaged in an exercise in the Committee on Development and Intellectual Property in mapping the various interactions between the SDGs and the programs of the organisation. We've also embraced the spirit of the SDGs in creating new partnerships, and I quote from the resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations as adopting the SDGs, in creating new partnerships, bringing together governments, the private sector, civil society, the United Nations and other actors, and mobilizing all available resources. And this we have done through a number of successful public-private partnerships. Let me mention just two of them, WIPO Research and the ABC, Accessible Books Consortium, which are both extremely active and successful public-private partnerships delivering public goods. I should mention that we will unveil this week a new public-private partnership with 20 major research-based pharmaceutical companies under which they will provide data in a new database that's been developed by our colleagues, data linking patents and medicines around the world, which will greatly facilitate the task of procurement of medicines and thus make a contribution to the question of the access to medicines. We asked one leading non-governmental organisation involved in this area to test the database, and they came back with an evaluation that they thought that it improved the efficiency of procurement by 30%. So this will be unveiled this week. I'm also pleased to report that the two new initiatives that we announced last year during the assemblies have been very successful and received a lot of take-up. The first of those was the establishment within the Secretariat within the Global Infrastructure sector of an Advanced Technologies Application Centre, ATAC, we call it. And that centre has pioneered and shepherded two world-class artificial intelligence applications. Now, if you look at the administration of intellectual property and you look at the volume of applications worldwide that I mentioned at the outset, which is a consequence of interest in the intellectual property system, then it's quite clear that human beings alone will be incapable of performing all of the functions necessary for the administration of intellectual property in the future. If you can imagine on 7 million trademark applications, many of them containing figurative or graphic elements, for a human being to search the similarity of this with everything that has preceded is quite difficult. Our colleagues have developed two applications, one of which is precisely a search, an image search and recognition system based on artificial intelligence, which returns results in a fraction of a second, and the other of which is a neural machine translation system, which has received much, I think, endorsement around the world, and which we license free of charge to 14 international organizations to improve the quality and efficiency of their translation services. The second new initiative, in addition to the one just mentioned, has been to pay more attention in a more consolidated and coherent manner to the judicial administration of intellectual property, and this in response to the demand from so many member states for activities in this regard. So we have established within the Legal Counsel's Office a division on the administration, judicial administration of intellectual property. An advisory group of judges has been established. A very successful masterclass on IP adjudication was held in collaboration with the Supreme People's Court of China in August of this year, and the first annual inaugural WIPO Judges Forum will be held in Geneva in November of this year. The area where the organisation faces the most challenges in moving forward is, of course, rulemaking, which is a regrettably common phenomenon in all of the international organisations at the present time. And that lack of capacity to move forward in the normative area is, of course, a complex issue and has many causes. But it comes at a very inconvenient time because technological change is bringing about really very profound economic and social change, and many questions are arising out of those changes. And one of those sets of questions is intellectual property questions or property questions. And their fitness, the fitness for purpose of intellectual property rights in the data-based intangible or knowledge economy. Now, there are some who feel that there are lacunae in the, or gaps in the intellectual property system in its application to data and to artificial intelligence and other applications, for example. And I believe that it would be a very good thing for a conversation around these complex issues to develop within the organisation. I'm not suggesting that the world is in any way ready to formulate new rules in these areas. It's less about, I think, providing answers and more about attempting to pose the right questions. And we would all benefit, I believe, from sharing knowledge, views and perspectives on these issues so as to advance our common understanding. Turning now just to the draft agenda of the assemblies for one moment, there are a number of institutional questions, as you know, that remain unresolved concerning the composition of the Coordination Committee, the composition of the Programme Budget Committee, and external officers. There are also several substantive issues that remain unresolved, most notably the possible convening of a diplomatic conference for a proposed design law treaty, and the design of a path forward towards a diplomatic conference in the area of broadcasting. It would be, I think, a very great achievement if we were able to finish, if the member states were able to finish these assemblies with at least one, if not several of those outstanding questions resolved. And that would be a very positive sign, as the President has, the Chair has already mentioned, a very positive sign for multilateralism, signal and message. Just before concluding, I would like to pay tribute to the wonderful staff of this organisation. There are many, many highly professional, skilled, dedicated and talented officers in this organisation who endeavour to ensure that the organisation delivers results and that the interests of the member states are served. And the positive results, I think, that we've had over the course of the last 12 months owes much to them. The development of our human capital, the retention of talent, and the flourishing of geographical and gender diversity are basic objectives for management. And in this respect, I should like also to reaffirm our fundamental commitment to the elimination of all forms of sexual exploitation and abuse, and to the initiatives of the Secretary-General of the United Nations and many others to put an end to such exploitation and abuse. Our support for a respectful workplace and working environment is unqualified. I thank you very much for your patience this morning, and I wish all delegations a very fruitful meeting of the Assemblies with the hope of positive results for the organisation. Thank you.